Welcome back to Motivation Library. Today, we're diving deep into this book called The Art of Laziness. It's by Library Mindset.
Laziness.
Yeah, so I know you might be thinking,
Kind of ironic for a motivation channel.
right,
Yeah.
laziness on a motivation channel. But just stick with me. This book, it really kind of flips the script on how we think about being productive. It basically says that, like, by embracing certain parts of laziness, like being choosy about what we do and how we spend our time, we can actually end up being more effective and getting better results.
So it's not about just lounging around all day.
No, not at all. It's more about being strategic.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What are some of the main ideas that the book, kind of explores?
Well, it's kind of split into two parts, right? You got mindset shifts and then practical tips. And it starts off strong, like right out the gate with this concept of taking, like 100% responsibility for your life.
I like that.
It's about, instead of blaming everything else, take ownership.
Yeah, that blame game. It's so easy to fall into that trap. You blame your schedule, you blame distractions, other people. But the book is saying, look, if you really want to feel empowered, you got to own your choices.
Yeah, it's like giving your power away when you blame outside stuff. You become a passenger in your own life instead of the driver.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It's like you're just along for the ride instead of actually steering the wheel.
Right. And the book uses this really cool story to kind of drive this point home. It's the story of a farmer and a sparrow.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So there's the sparrow, and it's super worried because the farmer keeps talking about harvesting his wheat, but he never actually does it.
So the sparrow and his family are just stuck in this like waiting game, all anxious, not knowing when or if things will actually happen.
Yeah, exactly. And it's only when the farmer finally decides to okay, I'm taking responsibility, I'm going to harvest this wheat myself, that anything gets done. It's like a metaphor for how we often wait for the perfect conditions or rely on outside forces to reach our goals. But the book is saying, nope, action and self-reliance, those are the real keys.
I love that. It's like, stop waiting for the stars to align and just start doing.
Yeah, exactly. Then the book, it kind of makes you think, what type of person are you? Are you someone who never starts? Or someone who starts but gives up easily? Or are you that person who keeps going no matter what and reaches their goals?
Those are some tough questions. Makes you really think about where you fit in. And I think we've all been in all three of those categories at some point, right?
We're all human.
But being self-aware, that's the key. Recognizing those patterns so we can make conscious choices about how we want to show up and what we want to achieve.
Absolutely. Speaking of showing up, the book then tackles this whole idea of our comfort zones.
Oh, comfort zones that could be so cozy,
Facts.
but also such a trap.
Right. They can hold us back if we let them. The book is saying that real growth, it rarely happens in familiar territory.
Yeah, push yourself, right?
Yeah.
Step outside of that comfortable bubble.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be something huge. It could be like learning a new skill, taking on a tough project or speaking up in a meeting when you usually stay quiet.
It's about recognizing when we're holding ourselves back and choosing to push past those self-imposed limits, kind of like flexing those courage muscles.
Exactly. And that leads us right into this next topic, which is self-discipline.
Self-discipline, that's a big one, especially in today's world with all the distractions.
Oh, yeah, it's tough. We can probably all relate to that struggle of procrastination. But the book asks this really thought-provoking question. Will you regret not doing this in the future?
Oof, that hits hard. Makes you think about the potential consequences of putting things off. Like, is that short-term comfort worth the long-term regret?
It's about delaying gratification and sometimes taking risks. The book also reminds us to be sure we're working on the right things. There's this great quote that compares even a genius like Michelangelo struggling to get out of bed if all he had to do all day were spreadsheets.
That's hilarious, but also so true. If you're constantly dreading your tasks, even if they're in your field, it might be a sign that something's off. Maybe you're not aligned with your true purpose.
Exactly. It's like even if you're technically good at something, if it doesn't light you up, it's going to feel like a chore. And that brings us to another interesting concept that the book explores, perfectionism.
Perfectionism, that can be a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it uses examples like Leonardo da Vinci and Steve Jobs, both known for their attention to detail, right?
Meticulous to a fault. But I guess there's a time and a place for that level of detail.
Right. And the book reminds us that sometimes done is better than perfect, especially if we tend to overthink and second-guess ourselves.
It's about finding that balance between striving for excellence and actually getting things done. And speaking of getting things done efficiently, the book then tackles this whole myth of multitasking.
Oh, multitasking, the ultimate productivity myth. The book uses a pretty powerful example to show the dangers of trying to do too many things at once.
Okay, lay it on me. What's the example?
The Mars Climate Orbiter.
The spacecraft.
Yeah, it turns out this $125 million spacecraft, it was lost because engineers messed up converting English units to metric units, like a tiny error, but with massive consequences.
Wow, that's a scary thought. It really highlights how even small mistakes can have huge repercussions, especially when we're trying to juggle multiple things at once.
Right. The book explains that focusing on one task at a time, it's not just more efficient, but it's less stressful too.
Makes sense. It's like giving your brain permission to focus on one thing at a time instead of constantly switching gears.
Exactly. And it suggests some practical tips like avoiding task switching, minimizing distractions, and turning off those non-essential notifications, like putting your phone on Do Not Disturb.
Oh, I love Do Not Disturb.
Uh-huh.
It's like a superpower. It helps me stay in the zone and actually get things done. Now, speaking of structure, the book talks about the importance of a daily routine.
Routine, yeah. It can be so powerful for consistency and focus.
I think a lot of people struggle with routine. Like, where do you even start?
Well, the book uses the example of Leo Tolstoy, the famous writer. He was all about routine. He'd wake up at the same time every day, go for long walks, and had specific hours for writing.
Makes you wonder, like, what's your ideal wake-up time? How could you structure your day to maximize your productivity? It's not about copying someone else's routine, right? It's about designing one that works for you.
Right. And then, speaking of designing your day, the book really emphasizes the importance of, learning to say no.
Saying no, that could be so tough, especially for people pleasers.
Yeah, it is. But the book argues that saying no is crucial for protecting your time and energy. It's like recognizing that you can't do everything, and saying yes strategically to the things that truly matter is way more impactful than saying yes to everything that comes your way.
It's about being selective with your commitments, right?
Yeah.
Choosing what aligns with your goals and values. And that selectivity also applies to our work hours, right? We don't have to be on all the time.
Right. The book challenges that always-on mentality with this funny quote. 20 years from now, the only people who will remember you worked late are your kids.
Ouch, that's a little too real. But it's a good reminder that productivity isn't about the number of hours we work, but about the results we achieve. And balance is key, not just for our well-being, but for our relationships and other important aspects of our lives.
It's about creating a sustainable and fulfilling way of working and living, not burning ourselves out.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, there was one chapter that really stuck with me, and it was about taking action instead of waiting for the perfect time. It used this great story about a bamboo tree.
Oh, the bamboo tree story. Yeah, I love that one. What a great analogy.
So this farmer plants a bamboo tree and waters it every day. But for the first 4 years, nothing happens. Like no visible growth above the ground.
4 years? That's a long time to wait for something to happen.
I know, right? But then in the 5th year, the bamboo shoots up 60 feet in just 6 weeks.
Whoa, that's amazing.
It's an incredible example of delayed gratification. But it's also about the power of consistent effort and patience, trusting the process.
It's like keep putting in the work, even when you don't see immediate results.
Right. The book calls it being impatient with action and patient with results.
I love that. And then thinking about the people around us and the impact they have on our actions, there's a whole chapter on surrounding yourself with the right people.
That's such an important point. We often underestimate the influence our social circle has on our habits and motivation.
The book talks about how we naturally tend to pick up the habits of those we spend the most time with, good or bad.
It's like that saying, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with.
Exactly. So it's crucial to be mindful of who we allow into our inner circle. Surround ourselves with people who inspire us to be our best.
People who lift us up and challenge us to grow. And on the topic of challenges, there's a great section on managing worry.
Worry. Such a drain on our energy.
Right. And the book starts with this quote from Mark Twain that really resonated with me. He said, "I'm an old man and have known many troubles, most of which never happened."
So true. We waste so much time and energy worrying about things that might never even happen.
And the book suggests a simple but effective way to deal with worry. Figure out what you can control and what you can't. If you can control it, take action. If you can't, let it go.
It's about shifting our focus from unproductive rumination to constructive action. Don't just worry about it, do something about it.
Exactly. And another tip that I found really helpful was to do the hard thing first.
Yeah, get it out of the way.
Right. The book uses this analogy. The cold water doesn't get warmer if you jump in later.
That's a good one. It's about facing those uncomfortable tasks head on instead of letting them loom over us all day.
Right. And it ties in with the idea that hard choices often lead to an easier life, while easy choices can make life much harder in the long run. Like sometimes the short-term discomfort is worth the long-term ease and fulfillment.
And then there's delegation. The book makes a really good point about how we don't have to do everything ourselves.
Delegation can be so freeing. It's about recognizing that we have limited time and energy, so it's more effective to focus on our strengths and let others handle the tasks that they can do well.
It frees up time and mental space for the things that truly require our unique skills and expertise.
Exactly. The book also talks about being selective about what we choose to learn, focusing on knowledge that has practical application in our lives and work. It also emphasizes that we don't have to wait for the perfect time or have all the answers before we start learning. The best time to start is now.
Totally agree. It's about embracing that learner mindset, being curious, experimenting, and constantly seeking new knowledge and skills that can help us achieve our goals.
Exactly. And I think we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive into the art of laziness.
It's amazing how all these different ideas, they actually weave together to create this really compelling framework for boosting productivity and reaching our goals.
It is. And the cool thing is, we've only just scratched the surface.
I know, right? We've got a whole other section coming up on practical tips and techniques that build on these mindset shifts.
Exactly. And in the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore those actionable strategies from the 80-20 rule to the intriguing Japanese concept of harahachibu.
Stay tuned. It's going to be good.
It is. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our deep dive into the art of laziness. We've laid the groundwork with some powerful mindset shifts, and now it's time to kind of get into the nitty-gritty, the tips and techniques that can actually help us, implement those changes in our daily lives.
I'm ready for action. What's the first step we can take?
Well, the book throws out a whole bunch of productivity tips, like 20 to be exact, but it doesn't spend too much time, explaining every single one in detail.
Okay, so it's more about the big picture approach.
Right. It's about how those tips connect to this desire for efficiency, which I know is like a big thing for our learner audience.
Gotcha. So were there any tips that really jumped out at you as being kind of surprising or like counterintuitive?
One that really caught my eye was this idea of setting deadlines, even for small tasks.
Really?
Yeah, it seems so simple, but the book is saying that having a deadline, even if it's just one you set for yourself, it creates that sense of urgency and accountability that can help us, overcome procrastination.
That's interesting. We usually think of deadlines for big projects, imposed by someone else. But using that same principle for everyday stuff, yeah, that could be really effective. Did any other tips stand out to you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. The book suggests scheduling specific times to check email.
That's interesting. In our always connected world, that seems a bit, I don't know, counterintuitive.
Right. But think about how often you get sucked into that email vortex and lose track of what you're actually supposed to be doing.
Oh, all the time. It's a black hole for productivity. I'm definitely guilty of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So by batching our email checks into specific time slots, we can focus on more important tasks without those constant interruptions.
I like that. It's about taking back control, of your time and attention.
Exactly. Now, I know the book also talks about, a couple of those classic productivity principles like the 80-20 rule and Parkinson's law.
Oh, yeah. Those are both great. The 80-20 rule, also called the Pareto principle, it basically says that 80% of our results come from just 20% of our efforts.
It's a powerful reminder to focus on those high-impact activities and delegate or eliminate the stuff that's not really moving the needle.
Exactly. Work smarter, not harder.
Right. And then there's Parkinson's law, which states that work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion.
So if you give yourself a week to do something, it'll probably take a whit. But if you have a tighter deadline, you'll find a way to get it done faster.
It's about setting those, realistic but challenging deadlines to create that sense of urgency and prevent us from getting bogged down in unnecessary details.
So you're saying deadlines can actually be our friends?
In a way, yeah. They can help us be more efficient and focused. Now, I know you were particularly intrigued by that section on Japanese techniques for overcoming laziness.
Oh, yeah. That was fascinating. It's like a whole different perspective on productivity.
It is. So which ones really resonated with you?
Well, there are so many, but if we had to pick just a few, I'd say Ikigai, Kaizen, and Shinrin-yoku are pretty relevant.
Okay, let's break those down. So Ikigai, as I understand it, it's about finding your reason for being, like that thing that gives you a sense of purpose and makes you excited to get out of bed in the morning.
Exactly. And the book outlines 4 key elements of Ikigai. Doing what you love, doing what you're good at, doing what the world needs, and doing what you can be paid for. When all 4 of those align, you found your sweet spot.
It's a beautiful framework. It's not just about finding a job you enjoy. It's about aligning your actions with something that gives your life meaning.
And that's when you really tap into your full potential, you know? What about Kaizen? What's that about?
Kaizen is all about continuous improvement, but not in like a drastic, overwhelming way. It's about making small, incremental changes each day.
I like that. Small steps, consistent progress. It feels more manageable than trying to change everything at once.
Exactly. And celebrating those small wins along the way can help keep you motivated and prevent you from getting discouraged.
It's like building momentum, one small win at a time. Okay, and the last one, Shinrin-yoku. What's that all about? I love the name.
It literally translates to forest bathing.
Forest bathing. That sounds incredibly relaxing.
It is. It's about spending time in nature, immersing yourself in the sights, sounds, and smells of the forest.
You know, I've always found that being in nature has such a calming and rejuvenating effect. I never knew there was an actual term for it.
There is. And the book talks about how Shinrin-yoku can help reduce stress, improve focus, and boost creativity.
Wow, so it's not just about relaxation. It actually has tangible benefits for our productivity.
Exactly. It's like hitting the reset button on your mind and body.
I love that. I'm definitely going to try to incorporate more forest bathing into my life.
Me too. It's a great way to reconnect with nature and recharge our batteries. Now, in addition to these Japanese techniques, the book also talks about a 10-minute before sleep routine.
A bedtime routine. Tell me more about that.
It's so simple but powerful. Basically, you dedicate just 10 minutes before bed to reflecting on the day and planning for tomorrow.
So it's like a mental bookend to the day, closing out the current chapter and setting intentions for the next one.
Exactly. The book suggests using this time to review your accomplishments, identify areas where you could have done better, and make a quick to-do list for the next day.
It's a great way to clear your mind before sleep and wake up feeling more organized and focused.
Right. It sets the tone for a more productive and intentional day. Now, there's one more technique I wanted to touch on that I think you'll find interesting. The Pomodoro Technique.
The Pomodoro Technique, I've heard of that. Isn't it something about tomatoes?
It is. It's named after those cute little tomato-shaped kitchen timers. Basically, you work in focused bursts of 25 minutes, separated by short 5-minute breaks.
So it's about breaking down your work into manageable chunks and building in regular breaks to prevent burnout.
Exactly. Those structured intervals of work and rest can help you stay focused, reduce mental fatigue, and be more productive overall.
It's like interval training for your brain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And while the book recommends starting with those classic 25-minute intervals, it emphasizes that you should adjust the timing based on your own needs and preferences. Some people focus better in longer blocks, others need shorter bursts. It's all about finding what works best for you.
And that's a great point. It's about experimenting, finding what resonates with you, and adapting these strategies to fit your own unique work style and lifestyle.
Exactly. It's not about following a rigid set of rules, but about creating a toolkit that helps you be more productive and achieve your goals in a way that feels sustainable and fulfilling.
So it's all about taking ownership of your productivity journey. I love that message.
It's empowering, right? It's not about a quick fix. It's about becoming more mindful and intentional in how you approach your work and your life.
I think that's what makes this book so appealing. It's not about a one-size-fits-all approach. It's about empowering you to find what works best for you.
Absolutely. And I think that wraps up this section on practical tips and techniques.
Wow, so many great ideas. I'm already feeling inspired to try some of these out.
Me too. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, we still have the outro to cover. What do you say we move on to the final part of our deep dive and see how the author wraps everything up?
Let's do it. I'm curious to see what final insights the book has in store for us.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the art of laziness. We've explored the mindset shifts, the practical techniques, and now it's time to see how the book kind of wraps everything up, what lasting impressions it leaves us with.
I'm excited to see how it all comes together. What are some of the key takeaways that the book emphasizes in the outro?
Well, the outro really drives home this point that Laziness, when approached strategically, it can actually be a powerful tool for boosting productivity and reaching our goals. It's not about, being lazy in the traditional sense, like avoiding work altogether, but it's about being intentional with our time and energy.
It's like we're reframing laziness, right? Instead of seeing it as the enemy of productivity, we can use it to our advantage.
Right. It's about working smarter, not harder, focusing on what really matters. And the book also encourages us to actually take action on at least one of the tips or techniques that we've discussed.
Yeah, it's not enough to just listen, right? We have to put these ideas into practice.
Exactly. It's about experimenting, finding what resonates with you, and adapting these strategies to fit your own work style and lifestyle.
So it's about taking ownership of your productivity journey, finding what works best for you. Now, to leave you with a final thought, something to kind of ponder, consider this. What are the hidden costs of laziness in your life?
That's a good question.
And I'm not just talking about, missed opportunities, but also the potential for increased stress, guilt, even, diminished well-being.
That's a really interesting point. We often think of laziness as just a lack of action, but it can have these deeper consequences.
Think about it like procrastination. It often leads to this spiral of stress and anxiety as those deadlines approach, and we're feeling overwhelmed by everything we've been putting off.
It's like we're creating unnecessary suffering for ourselves.
Right. And the book reminds us that taking action and being productive, it's not just about, external achievements. It's also about cultivating a sense of inner peace and fulfillment, that sense of self-efficacy.
It's about feeling good about ourselves and the progress we're making.
Exactly.
And on that note, I think we've come to the end of our deep dive into the art of laziness.
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. We've explored this seemingly paradoxical concept, and I hope you've gained some valuable insights along the way.
I know I have. It's definitely changed my perspective on laziness and productivity.
I'm glad to hear that. And, as we wrap up this episode, I want to encourage everyone to subscribe to Motivation Library for more deep dives into inspiring and thought-provoking books.
And don't forget to like this video and let us know in the comments what your biggest takeaway was from the Art of Laziness.
We love hearing from you. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep striving to be your best selves.
Even if that means embracing a little bit of strategic laziness along the way.
Wise words. See you next time.